Hi, today we're going to change the filters on an Aquaverve Bottleless Fahrenheit water cooler. So the first step is going to be to unpack our new filter kit. And what you'll find inside here is a set of instructions, two new filters, a piece of tubing with two what are called stem elbow fittings on the end, and one longer piece of tubing. And this will be the actual piece of tubing that connects the filters to the top of the water cooler. The first step is going to be to turn the water off. That's the most important. That prevents big messes. After turning the water off, I like to run a little water through the faucet just to relieve the pressure on the system so that the filters and fittings can be disconnected easily. Okay, that should do it. The next step is going to be to remove the top and disconnect the water lines from the base unit. So as you know, these fittings work by pushing the collet in on the fitting in order to disconnect the tubing. Normally this is a two-hand operation. So I've disconnected that, and now I'm going to disconnect the tubing from the inlet filter, and that is our water line, and we're going to use that to reconnect the new filters. So I now have my filter system inside the top cover, and you can see some black tape holding them to their brackets. That black tape is only for transit purposes to prevent the filters from coming loose during shipment. So when we take that tape off, we won't be replacing it. Okay, I removed the black tape and disconnected the filters from their brackets, so the top cover looks like this with just empty brackets. These filters can now be discarded. I won't be needing those again. As you can see on these filters, one end is smooth and the other end has kind of a knob on it. And the knob end is actually the in end. That's the end that water goes in. This is the flow direction to the smooth end, the out end. So what we're going to do is basically the water supply line is going to come in the inside. The water is going to come out this end and go in the inside of the second filter, to the out end of the second filter, and then into the cooler. So it's going to pass through both filters before entering the cooler. So that's how we achieve the filtration level that we're looking for. So to start with, I'm going to connect a piece of tubing between the two filters. And what you'll notice is this is the outside of one and the inside of the other. So that directs the water that's coming through our filter, out this filter, but back into this filter. And it's the bottom here that will connect to the top of the cooler, and it's the bottom here that will be our water supply line. This is all detailed in the instructions that come with the water cooler, but basically it follows the directions of the flow arrows that are actually printed on the filters. So I'm going to snap these into my brackets inside the cover. I usually snap the in filter on my right and the out filter on my left, just to keep things uniform from installation to installation. You can see how both filters are snapped in their brackets. The next step is that I want to connect the water supply line. It's very important to run that water supply line through the hole in the back of the cover. Otherwise, you'll have to disconnect it and connect it again. Now when I connect this water supply line, I want to connect it to the in filter. Make sure it's firmly inserted. Everything looks good in here, so I'm now going to connect my piece of tubing from the out filter. And this piece of tubing is going to connect to the top of the cooler when the filters have been properly flushed. And that's another important thing to remember is once you have your system in this configuration, your water supply line is connected to the in filter, the two filters are connected at the top, and your water line to the top of the cooler is ready to be connected. Now it's time to flush the filters. Okay, so we've turned our water on, and I'm beginning to flush the filters, and I'm just watching for that water, which initially starts out a little gray. Basically, what's flushing out of the system is carbon dust. These are activated carbon filters. They remove chlorine, lead, PCBs, chemicals, pesticides, all flavors and odors. And they're dry filters inside. Once they're wet, they discharge some of the dust that is on the carbon, and that once they are wet, they don't produce any additional dust. Okay, so my water's gone crystal clear coming out of the tubing, so now we can turn the water off and finish up the installation. Okay, the next step is to connect the water line from the filtration system to the top of the cooler. It's handy to have a second person to hold the top while you do that. In this case, I'm just going to use this box here to hold the cover. I'll just lay the cover down on here. That gives me a good hand on the elbow so I can insert the tubing and make sure it's in firmly. I'm then going to just set the cover on top, tucking the tubing inside, and everything's installed. I do like to turn the water on now and check all the fittings just by lifting up the cover, make sure there's no drips, make sure all the tubing has been firmly inserted. And once I've done that, just let the cooler fill and come back and check it one more time, and everything's good to go. But that's a pretty simple Fahrenheit bottleless cooler from Aquaverve filter change.